It's like this. This is not Andrew. You guys know. Shorts and t-shirt is who I am. But in business, you have to adapt to who your customers are and the situation, because you have to always be maximizing your opportunities. All right. So that's something that wasn't in my notes. All right. Entrepreneurship, a Christian perspective. And as with last night, guys, please stop me if you want to ask a question. If you're not sure about something, something's not clear, please, we are all to learn. Me too. Okay, what is an entrepreneur? So I had a look in the dictionary. It says it is someone who sees a gap in the market and takes a risk to establish a business to meet this need. This is one of the most exciting and scary things that you can do, and the result of this is extremely fulfilling. All right, so this is something that you have to act on. You can't be sitting at home hoping that somebody is going to send you a good deal. It doesn't work like that. All right, does the Bible speak about business? Now, throughout the Bible, you'll see there's lots of things. Many times, it talks in the context of farming, because that was the time that the Bible was in. Most of it was farming. There's also a lot on plain business. There are two pieces that I want to look at quickly. The first is in Proverbs, and this piece is talking about a good wife, but we want to look at the business aspect of this. It's Proverbs 31, 13 to 18, and 24. I've used the New Living Translation because in all of my verses, I'm reading the New Living Translation currently, so that's what I'm using. Okay, so verse 13. She finds wool and flax and busily spins it. She's like a merchant ship bringing her food from afar. She gets up before dawn to prepare breakfast for her household and plans the day's work for her servant girls. She goes to inspect the field and buys it. With her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She's energetic and strong, a hard worker. She makes sure her dealings are profitable. And then verse 24, she makes belted linen garments and sashes to sell to the merchants. Okay, so we see here that she works hard. Okay, she makes investments. She reinvests her earnings, and her trading is profitable. So this gives you a good example of a business model, something that we can apply. Right, then the other one I want to look at is the parable of the talents. Wynand spoke a bit about it last night. So Matthew 25, verse 14 to 27. Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities he left on his trip. So the first thing we see here is God does it according to our abilities. So all of us have different abilities, and God doesn't expect more than our abilities. He gives it in proportion to our abilities. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had spent his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest. I have earned 5 more." The master was full of praise. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I've earned 2 more." The master said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." Then the servant with one bag of silver came and said, "Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I would have gotten some interest on it." This parable is about the kingdom of heaven, but Jesus uses a business example for us here. It's all about working with money in this. We are focusing on the business aspect of this. The master was unhappy that the third servant didn't at least earn interest on the money. As we can see, business is something that is throughout the whole Bible. Right, so a lot of people say Christianity and business have got nothing to do with each other. It's not true. The Bible's full of examples of business. Right, entrepreneurship. So I've come up with something which I've been applying for many years. Some of the time I didn't know this, but I recorded it a couple of years ago, and I call it the head, hands, and heart approach. All right. Head. Always use your head. Continuously be thinking, observing, and being mentally ready to act. All right. It doesn't help if you're not in a position to act if something happens. So always be using your head. Heart. Always be courageous. Be prepared to step out and have the courage to stand up and try again. Many Chinese entrepreneurs are only successful on their third business. So be strong. Hands. Always be prepared to do the necessary work. Don't fear hard work and long hours. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's what entrepreneurs are. Be the toughest boss that you've ever had. Then Genesis 3:19, which Wynand also mentioned yesterday. By the sweat of your brow will you have food to eat until you return to the ground from which you were made. For you were made from dust, and to dust you will return. We are set free from sin, but we still live in a world with the consequences of sin. And as an entrepreneur, you've got to get out and you've got to work hard. Right. I've got a story I want to tell you, and there's a couple of points I want to take out of this. And the title of the story is A Young Boy Called Andrew. All right. When I was around 7 years old, I started my journey as an entrepreneur. I was living on a farm, and I noticed that the guys on the farm liked playing cards. So when I went to the shop with my mom to buy groceries, I took my savings and I bought 2 packs of cards. Full of bravado, I went to sell my wares, only to find out that nobody had any money. You will always encounter obstacles, okay? I was undeterred by this and started on the barter system. I traded each pack of cards for chicken. All right. I returned home as a farmer. I received a bonus as the 2 chickens laid some eggs. Me being a new farmer, I did not realize this, and the chickens were sitting on the eggs. And to my surprise, the eggs hatched and now I had a brood of chicks. All right. So I started trading in chickens and slowly worked up to a few goats. And finally I got a cow. I was so impressed with myself. Then the cow died. Okay. I lost all my money and had to start from scratch. By the time I finished primary school, I had a few cows. There was a drought and I was going to boarding school, so I sold the cows. Being stuck in boarding school didn't stop me. I started selling second-hand books and sweets. I also got a holiday job in high school to increase my income. With my trading and working, I managed to save enough money to buy the piece of property that I live on today at the age of 19. Okay. I only built the house much later. All right, so my entrepreneurship started from a very young age. All right. I didn't understand it at that stage. Looking back, I understand it, but I believe I had a talent for that, and probably per chance I stumbled into it. Okay, but I've never looked back. So let's have a look at a few things from this story. First thing is work with what you have. Don't be sitting there saying one day when I have. Okay? It's a good plan. It's good to plan big and look to the future. But for now, make your plan fit with what you have and where you are. Okay? If you have zero resources, then use your head and your hands to create some resources. Have that as step one. What do I mean by that? It might be go and get a job. Okay? That might be what it is, so you can get some resources together. So don't look at it and say, well, I have nothing, I can do nothing. None of us here have the opportunities that Elon Musk has, all right, because of the money he has. Also, none of us can make a loss like Elon Musk can, all right? So understand that. Everything is relative. Where you are is relative to where you are, okay? So work with what you got. If you have any resources, look and see what you can do with them. You don't necessarily start with your dream, work towards it. All right, so what do you have? Have a look at that and say, what can I do with this? And it may be something physical. I've got a car. Okay, what can I do with a car? Or I know how to bake cakes. What can I do with that? So look at what you have, what your abilities are, and then formulate a plan around that to start with. And it doesn't have to be your dream of this is what I want to do, but you need to get started somewhere. Always look for opportunities. Seeing a need and meeting that need is an important part of being an entrepreneur. If you see a problem, find a solution. Sometimes no one even realizes there's a problem until the solution is presented. And most of you here are too young to remember computers without Windows. All right, Wynand does. All right. No one knew that there was a problem until Bill Gates launched Windows. Virtually no one can operate a computer today without it anymore. Solve the problem and reap the reward. Right? Nobody knew that there was a need for that. He saw the need before anybody else did. And he found a solution for it before anybody even knew there was a problem. Right? So step out there. Don't be scared. Do your research. I was presented with an opportunity recently, and it sounded wonderful. This company approached us. They would lend us the money to build a strip mall. They owned the ground, and the deal was that we would run the strip mall for 10 years and then sell it back to them for double what it cost us. And they would take it over then as a fully operational business. So this sounded awesome. Then I started having a look, and the location was a problem. The inhabitants in the area was only 10,000 people. All right, there already were shops there, so I couldn't see how with just 10,000 population, you could run a whole strip mall and do it successfully. So you have to look at opportunities, but Study them, because it doesn't help if you go into something like that. Yeah, somebody's going to give you the money, they're going to do all of this. But how do you run it for 10 years when there's going to be no income? So don't just look at it and say, wow, this is a huge opportunity. Look at the whole thing and then say, yes, okay, this is a workable solution. So do your research. Do your planning. Never stumble forward. Plan how you will operate and execute what you do. Constantly adapt and streamline your plan. I changed to a barter system when there was no cash available. Be more effective, be more efficient, and be more profitable. Refine your plan continuously. There's a saying in military that no plan survives the first contact. All right? And business is very much like that too. So you need to have a plan, but you need to also be prepared to change your plan if that plan is not going to work. So you might have misread the market, or the market changes. All right? You take the thing of the Windows. Not a person here is going to go and buy a computer today that cannot operate with Windows. Okay? So you can be making awesome computers that operate on 1980 technology. Nobody's going to buy them, so there's no point of that. So you need to be adaptable always. Always persevere. If you don't succeed, try and try again. My car died. I could have just given up. Okay. My dad actually told me a couple of years ago that he wanted to give me the money for the car, and then realized that if he did that, I would never have learned anything. So sometimes you've got to suffer to learn. Okay. I had to take it on the chin and start over again. As mentioned previously here, a lot of Chinese entrepreneurs only succeed on their third attempt. So don't give up. Okay, don't give up. Try and try again. Right. Not a lot of questions coming here, so either I'm talking too much or not making sense. So. All right. My next point is integrity. All right. Integrity is extremely important. If you don't have integrity, how can you expect God to bless you? All right. I had a case some years ago where I owned a house. Everybody was subdividing their houses to maximize rental income, and there was a shortage of rentals in Rustenburg at the time. I subdivided my house, and it worked perfectly. However, it wasn't legal to do this. I attended a conference in Joburg a couple of years later, very similar to what we're doing here. And I was challenged on this. God convicted me to stop this as it wasn't legal. Right, so in that conference, the guy challenged us and said, make sure what you're doing is legal. If you want God to bless you, make sure that you're operating legally. I sold the house. Right. If you don't have integrity in all your dealings, how can you expect anything from God? Have integrity. Don't operate illegally. Pay your tax. Don't bribe. Don't justify what you're doing if it isn't correct. All of us are very, very quick to do that. You know, tax is the first one. Why should I pay tax? Look what the government does with the money. They waste all the money. Why should I give them more? Okay. That is not within our thing to operate. That's their responsibility. Our responsibility is to pay the tax. All right. It is possible to do business with integrity. All right. It is not easy, okay, because the world we live in is very corrupt and it is very bad. But you can do that. And I actually, in my quiet time this morning, I'm busy reading Proverbs. And I think it was Proverbs 20, verse 1. Said, it is better to have a good name than to have riches. All right. So you can get this deal if you pay this bribe, all right? But you've thrown your name away. So it is better to have your integrity, to have a good name, than to get the deal there. And this is where faith comes in. We have to trust that God is looking after us. It's not us, it's God. So faith is very, very important. Okay? If you're not trusting in God, you're wasting your time. Right, next point. Upskill yourself and be aware of what is happening. Okay, read books. Listen to podcasts. Watch YouTube or TikTok videos. Watch or read the news. Knowledge is power. The more you know in your field, the better you can do what you do. The better you are, the more value you can add and the more sales you can do. You need to differentiate yourself from everyone else. Be aware of changes. You need to always adapt. And if you are aware of what is happening, you can also see new opportunities. Now, I read the news all the time, okay? And when I say the news, I read the business news all the time, okay, to see what is happening. And I did a thing about 2 years ago. It was a company in Zambia that owed us quite a lot of money, and they weren't paying anybody. And I think it had been outstanding for about 3 years already. And then I read an article in one of these business newspapers. And this company had been taken to task by the Zambian government. Because they were owned by an Indian company, they were stealing the money out of Zambia and moving it to India. And they hadn't paid tax. So the Zambian government said that if you do not settle what you owe, we are going to nationalize your whole company. And it is massive mines and refineries and everything. So they immediately started speaking to the Zambian government. And most governments I don't care for, but this I thought was honorable. The Zambian government said you have to pay us and everyone else that you owe money to. Okay? So that was the deal that they had. Otherwise, they would lose everything. I immediately then got our accounts department to put in a claim against them for the money that they owed us. Had I not been reading the news, I wouldn't have known that had happened, and I would have missed that opportunity. They did pay us, so we got our money. Yeah, so be aware of what's happening. It is important that it can make you money, it can save you money. You know, you might be deciding to invest in a development. Then you find that the SANRAL is going to put a highway straight through the middle of that property. So then that would be a disaster because they're not such easy people to negotiate with, and they don't normally give you very much money back for your land. So, you know, be aware of what is happening. Okay, honor God. So honor God with your business. Pay your tithes. And please don't look at turnover, but look at profit. Right? I've heard people saying before you need to pay tithes on your turnover. That's ridiculous because some companies only make 1 or 2% profit. How do you possibly pay 10% if you only get 2%? Your tithe must be on the increase. You can do it in whichever way makes sense. You can do it on a monthly, a quarterly, annually, or even on a project base. But please do this. Do it with a correct attitude and heart. God loves a cheerful giver. All right, so this is not a law. As Wynand was saying last night, you do things because God is so awesome, and you are in God, and you want to do things that please God. All right. God doesn't need your money. Okay? Doesn't need your money. It's a heart issue. And this is part of faith. Paying your tithe means that you have faith that God is going to provide for you regardless. Okay? So you have faith that you can do without that 10%. All right. So it is a faith thing. So honor God. Okay. Entrepreneurship is 24/7. You need to always be aware and busy thinking. What is the next step? What do I change? Where do I go? You need to be self-motivated. And I want to leave you with Proverbs 6, verse 6 to 8. It says, take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. Learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter. All right, so I want to encourage you on that. All right, be like the ant. You know, get up, work hard, pray about what you're doing, listen to God. All right. Being an entrepreneur is not a place for lazy people. All right. Lazy people get jobs in the government. All right. Okay. All right. So I want to encourage you to do that. Don't think being an entrepreneur is easy. It's hard work. Okay? It's hard work. But it is fulfilling and it is fun and it is exciting. And you can reap the benefits from that, and other people can reap the benefits for that. Where I am today, we're employing about 180 people. So when I was 7 years old, I was only providing for myself. Okay. God has given me that ability, and with other people. It's not just me. Okay. And through that, other people have got jobs. Other people have been blessed. It must never be just about us. So I want to encourage you guys. Go out and do well. Right. Now you guys can ask questions.
Okay, two questions that are floating around in my head. Number one, I think some of my greatest frustration is when you're in business, everybody wants to tell you something. They all want to give you, people want to give you advice. And everyone wants to give you advice, from family to business in business. So maybe some good, I've read so many things about don't take advice from people unless their life looks like what you want, Maybe from a Christian perspective, what is good advice, and how do you judge, what kind of advice is helpful advice? Number one. Okay, and then number two, from an entrepreneurship perspective, from somebody who loves new ideas, loves business opportunities, always looking for a gap and something that, and probably drives the people that work with me crazy, because I've always got something, some castle in the sky that I think could be a great idea. But often I've received advice, don't diversify too widely, stick to what you know. And I just feel like many income streams, and I'm always looking for a bit of excitement. That sounds like something cool to be a part of. So maybe a bit of advice with regards to diversifying. What is a good idea, and how is it a good idea to spread yourself or to stick to what you know?
All right, firstly on the advice. So you need to take advice and look at where it comes from. All right. So you can listen to what everybody has to say, and most people talk a lot of nonsense. All right. But even amongst people that know nothing, you sometimes get a pearl of wisdom that comes out of that. So what is very important is judge it, and don't just take it in. All right. And now I'm talking just on a business perspective. There was a story I think it was the 1950s or 1960s. A bolt company in America made a mistake, and they made a huge quantity of bolts with the wrong thread on. Okay. So it doesn't screw into anything, so they can't sell it. So they then said, okay, we're going to go bankrupt. And they were busy having a board meeting discussing how they're going to do this because they're going to fold. It's going to collapse the company completely. And there was a guy there busy emptying the dustbins. And he said to him, excuse me, I know I'm just emptying the dustbins here, but can I say something? So they all reckoned, well, we're going to fold anyway. Might as well let this guy say something. All right. And he said, chuck one bolt into every bag of bolts that you're selling. Because when the guy's on site, and we've got a couple of guys here who work on site. So when the guy's on site, if he tries to put the bolt in and it doesn't want to catch, he's going to throw it on the floor, and he's going to take another one out of the bag and carry on. Okay. And so they did that, and they got out of trouble by doing that. Okay. So that is a simple thing. But I have a thing for myself. Okay. Medical advice, I ask my doctor. Okay. I don't ask the guy standing on the corners fixing cell phones. I'm like, why would I ask that guy for medical advice? Legal advice, I ask my lawyer. Okay. Financial advice, I discuss with my accountant. So these are people that are specialized in those things. Does that mean you can't get stuff from other people? No. Okay. But don't go looking for medical advice from the guy who fixes a cell phone. You're setting yourself up for a problem, okay? When it comes to business in a biblical sense, seek out people that you feel are, that have a good relationship with God, all right? And then you can speak to them. So something like integrity is something you can discuss with anybody who has a good relationship with God, because they will give you good advice on integrity. If it is a business thing, then find somebody that you feel has got a bit of experience in that area and ask them. So that would be my advice on who to listen to. So listen to everybody, but judge it. Okay? Very important, judge it. Okay, sorry, what was your second question? Okay. All right, so diversification is a yes and no answer. All right. So the first thing is you need to establish a platform. All right. So if you have a platform to work off of, you can diversify. If you don't have a platform to work off of, you can't diversify. All right, because you need to be able to manage what you're busy with. So if you've got something that's solid and you've got this thing established and it's running well, there's two ways of diversification. You can add on to what you're currently doing, okay, and that's less diversification and more of growing your business, but it is a form of diversification. So if you're doing product A, you can add product B to your range, or you're doing service A, you can add service B to your range. So that is an easy way to grow, and it is less risky. But if we take, for instance, you've got a dance school, and you decide to open a takeaway shop. Now that's heavily diversified, okay? It's very heavily diversified. First, make sure that this new venture is not going to collapse your current venture, okay? So if this thing is going to take all your time and you can no longer do this, then no, all right? If this thing is going to fold you because of cash, then no, okay? If you can accommodate that, then you can diversify like that, but then you cannot be in two places at once. So as Wynand said last night, have 20 businesses and appoint 19 CEOs, okay? Because then you can diversify and you can operate. Then you just have to check on one person to make sure that that's all operating correctly. So diversification, yes, but with caution.
Morning, everyone. Excuse me. in diversity, do you think in a sense of franchising can be a better option?
Franchising is something that can work extremely well because somebody else has already worked out a lot of the kinks. So a lot of the problems have been taken away. You've got a business model, you've got a plan. If you take like KFC, for instance, if you get a KFC franchise, they actually scout the place to put it. So you can't just say, I want a KFC franchise. They will say, okay, that's fine, but you need to put it on the corner of this and this street. So a lot of the problems are taken away, but there's a price to pay, okay? Because you have fees you have to pay back to them on a continuous basis, royalties or whatever. So that has to be paid back on a continuous basis. So it is definitely something that can work very well. But saying that, there's also a lot of franchises that fail because the royalty side is too high and it takes all the profit out of the business. So then you're just working for another boss. Okay. Yes.
Just on the integrity side of things, if you're facing a situation where you've now applied for, or you've quoted the person, and this person is the only one that can say yes or no to the quote, but they are pushing for something under the table, how do you, I'm sure you've dealt with those situations, how do you deal with that without ruining that relationship or souring the deal? How do you approach that?
Right. If you're in that position, 100 to 1, you're going to sour the deal. Okay. There's very few, and I have had on occasion before where somebody's asked me for a bribe and I've said no, and they've given me the order anyway and pretended it never happened. Okay, they were just taking a chance. But most times, if you presented with a thing like that, it's going to sour the deal, it's going to can it. When I was young, I think just out of the army, so my early 20s, and I was just working as a sales rep, so I was getting commission on everything. I actually had a very direct thing. It wasn't even hinted on or anything like that. We were doing quite a lot of business with Sun City. And one of the things that we were doing, we were supplying them wheels for the trolleys that they emptied the slot machines with. Because you'll be amazed how much money weighs if you got a whole massive box full. So we had special wheels that went on the trolleys because they had to be able to go over the carpets and the tiles without damaging that, but also to be able to handle the weight. And then in Klabani, a new Sun International casino opened up, Klabani Sun. And I got a phone call from the maintenance manager, and he asked if I could come see him. And he said that Sun City had recommended that he speaks to me about the wheels for his trolleys and whatever, so we have a whole discussion on that. And I do him a quote, and in those days you faxed it through, so I faxed the quote through, and next week he phoned me. He said, can I come and see him, please? So I said, yes. And so I went to see him, and he said to me, okay, do you do swimming pool pumps and filters? And we actually used to sell quite a lot of swimming pool pumps and filters. So I said, yes, we do swimming pool pumps and filters. So he asked me what the prices were. So I said to him, oh, it's more or less this much. So he gave me my quote back. And he said, just add that on there, but don't specify. Just divide it between all the other items. So I said to him, what do you mean? So he said to me, no, just divide it between that, and then you can deliver them to my house, and I'll send you the order. Okay? So I said to him, no, I don't work like that. So he said, no, this is how we work. So I said to him, no, I don't work like that. And he swore at me and told me to get out of his office and never, ever come back. Okay? And where they bought the wheels from, I have no idea, but it wasn't from us. Okay? So it will sour the deal, but your name is worth more than riches. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Annie. It's been very insightful. Have you ever been looking back at your life and be amazed at what you have achieved? And is there, in a nutshell, can you put that just in a nutshell for us? I just want to get back to my writing.
Okay. Okay, well, what amazes me is that I'm still young. Okay. Yeah, if I look back, I can see God's hand in everything. And without God, I don't think it was possible. So if you want to summarize it in one word, it's God. Okay.
My question is regarding financing, either for growth or for starting up. How would you advise? Because obviously banks don't work. I had to learn that the hardest way. But how do you set yourself up with what you have? Let's say just as a professional, or as a small business, so that you are able to finance growth, or able to access financing in a country where there's no financing for small businesses? Or
There's no financing for unconnected people. Okay. Matlo, it's a difficult one. It's something that I battle with, okay? And I think on every level that you battle with it. You know, if you're doing a spaza shop, you're looking for 500 Rand to be able to buy some stock. And it carries on where you might be looking for millions to do a project. It is extremely difficult in South Africa to get financing, okay? Worst case scenario, you get back to you work with what you got. But you have to always be trying. All right? Because your capital is not what you own. Your capital is what you can use. All right. So if you can get R1 million from the bank, that's capital you have that you can use. Yes, you got to pay it back, but it's capital that you have now that you can use. So you have to look at things continuously and then look at stuff where you have to pay cash and look at stuff where you can get financing. So stuff like vehicles, for instance, many businesses need vehicles to operate. Vehicles you can normally get financing on, okay? So don't take your cash and buy vehicles then. Use your cash on something that you can't get financing on. But with all financing, you've got to remember there's a cost to pay. So make sure that you can meet repayments if you're going to do financing. Because sometimes banks will lend you more money than what you can pay back, okay? So you do your own due diligence on it. Can you pay it back? Then depending on what type of business you're in, see who will give you credit, all right? So if you're building, can you get credit for cement? So if you can get credit for cement, then that's great. Then now you've got credit for something, so you can start your job, then meet a milestone so you can get a payment, then you can pay for the stuff that you've used. So that's another place you can go. But once again, be careful, because you've got to repay this money. Okay, it's not like, okay, you now borrow all this money and you buy a new Mercedes, because then you've got a problem. Okay, so there's lots of things like that you can get financing on, or you can get credit from different people. There's a lot of places that will give you money, and they're akin to a cash loan place. Don't go there, because they're going to kill you. Okay, maybe literally. Okay, maybe literally. Okay, so don't go there. But we've turned projects away before because we couldn't finance it. We just couldn't find a way to put it together, so we turned it away. Because you can only do what you can do. That's what I was saying about Elon Musk. Elon Musk can have opportunities bigger than what we can have, okay? But he can also make losses bigger than what we can, all right? So you have to put it in that perspective. What can you lose? Because you can't commit to more than what you can lose, you know? So you have to always be playing that game. And sometimes you just have to say no. And then there's a thing of risk versus reward. So sometimes I feel this is dodgy, okay? I'm uncomfortable, so I will put in an extremely high price, okay? And some of those I've got, all right? But you have to then calculate risk versus reward. So if there's high risk involved, you can't go in at a low margin, all right? You have to go in at a very high margin because you're running that risk. If it is low risk, yes, you can lower your margin, okay? And risk has got to do with many, many different things. And politics is one of those things. You need to view what the political situation is. And if you're dealing outside of South Africa, you need to look at what's it like in that country. But you also have to look at the politics of the world. You know, Trump makes a speech, and suddenly our money is worth half of what it was before, okay? All right? And he's got nothing to do with us. And he wasn't trying to be funny to us either, but he said something, and now it's a disaster, okay? Look at the petrol price, okay? So you've got to be looking at all of these things all the time and looking at the risk. And financing is risk. So you've got to have a look at that risk and see, okay, yes, this risk is worth it. Anybody else? Yes.
Is there a certain formula that brings you basically down to a certain level where you can balance your company's overheads with the income to ensure that you meet the minimum profit at the end of the month on a monthly basis or annually?
Okay, so there's no formula, okay. A lot of it's got to do with what type of business. So every single different type of business would have a different formula, all right. If you have got a service-only business, for instance, so like you guys, you got a dance school. So what you have to be able to do is cover your salary. And if you can cover your salary, you're home and dry, okay? Then if you are buying material to resell, you have to be able to pay for the material. If you're doing work where you are, say, building something, you need to cover the labor and the material. So they are all different. And your profit margins are also different in those different things. Because your gross profit margin on service only looks very high, okay? Whereas if you're buying and selling stuff, your gross profit is much smaller. So it is kind of a very broad question. But you need to be analyzing your costs and then saying, okay, if we are going to run at this sales or income, then our gross profit margin has to be X for our company. And then you target it on that level and say, okay, we need to be making a minimum of this per month. If you make more than that, then you start moving into a profit scenario for the company. So you have to sit and work that up. But it's a company by company basis. Yes, Talia.
I don't really know how to go about this question. I'm into oil paintings, and I want to sell my oil paintings. So at this stage in my life, it's difficult to go out to markets, to carry and to display. So how would you advise me to try to sell my paintings?
That's an interesting one. All right. Other than that, my wife paints paintings. I don't know anything about painting paintings. I can't classify myself as being somebody very knowledgeable on art. All right, but what I do know is beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think art is very much like that. You can have something that one person thinks is disgusting, and another person pays millions of rands for it, and I don't understand the whole thing, but yeah, that is the reality. So getting to the paintings, I think that you have two types of that. You have commissioned paintings, and you have stuff that you just paint. Now, the commissioned paintings, obviously somebody's going to pay you for a certain thing. I want a picture of a tree or whatever it might be. So that, where you are, you can have a look at advertising on social media, things like that. And it is, maybe you won't get as many orders, but the risk is low because you get paid for something up front. With the other paintings, the ones that you just paint, if you can't go to markets, I would also say social media. All right. So that's what I could say on that. Okay, question is, if I'm not good at social media, then what should I do? So find somebody that you know that's a couple of generations younger than you, okay? And that might even be somebody who's 10 years old, okay? And ask them to assist you, but then learn, okay? Learn, because it's not good enough having to phone them every time and say, please come and post this for me. You need to learn and upskill yourself in that. But find somebody that is going to sit and have a cup of coffee with you and show you for free. Okay. Cindy. Cindy? Yeah. That's her business, yeah.
Sorry, Busco, you were first.
Now come to the mic so everybody can.
Yeah.
So the other option is to find partners. maybe people who paint, people who do interior decor, so they become your strategic partners. You don't have to sell per se yourself, but every time they go to either a corporate office or they go to somebody's house to, to uplift the face of that, they can even come to you and ask you to customize whatever the client wants them to be. So based on the client's theme. That's another way, just to find those strategic partners. And for those, it can also be throughout the country. It doesn't have to be in Rustenburg per se, but yeah, that kind of partnership. So when you do look out, look for interior decorators, look for architecturers and so forth, because then they can always incorporate your work in their work.
Tani Dalian, I just think it's important that when we're talking social media, when you're thinking about going onto social media, selling your stuff online, that you do need to be careful that if you connect with somebody to help you, first of all, you connect with somebody in person, because there are many people online that will tell you they can sell all sorts of things and send your things all over the place, and can even be selling your things for money that they receive, but they never touch your paintings and your painting never goes anywhere and you never receive that money. So just be careful that young people are amazing at social media, but they're also very savvy. So they'll be able to tell you what is okay, what's not okay, what to be careful of, what you need to look out for. Don't Google somebody to help me sell my paintings, because then you can end up having a whole bunch of people who will help you sell your paintings for their own gain, if that makes sense. You do need to be careful. And then that there are lots of young people who know the trends. Social media is what is trending currently, and they have their kind of finger to the pulse. It's an industry all to itself. And if you speak to young people, they'll be able to help you. But like I say, connect with somebody that you know, who will sit and have a cup of coffee with you and who will be able to help you, that you can see in person. Don't find somebody online to help you do that, because that can be very dangerous, yeah.
You've got a business and you're running it, and I just wanted, my question to you, and I know you've chatted to me about it, but if you die, how do you protect your family from the debt of the business? And because, obviously it's generations that your husband or your spouse might sit with that, they come calling. So that's the question. And then death taxes, because I know that if you die, you have to pay a lot of money. And then generational wealth, if you can explain the generational wealth, because I've seen, your dad, you started, but your dad started, now you've got it, Greg is coming in, Haley, and so forth, generational stuff.
It's about a 4-hour question, that. All right, so, okay. The question, once again, depends on where you are and what you're busy with. So one of the things that I do is I don't sign surety, all right? So I would recommend that nobody signs surety. The Bible says only a fool signs surety. So it doesn't say you're not allowed to sign it. It just says that if you do, you're a fool. So, I don't sign surety. So that's the first step of protecting my family if I die, because then I am not somebody who has all of these debts now suddenly come to my estate. So that's the first thing. Then, as far as protecting your family and protecting the family and the business separately, and death taxes and all of that, this becomes very complex, because this has got to do with where you are, what you're doing. If you've got a very, very small business, it's irrelevant. If you've got a big business, it becomes much more relevant. So it is something that you have to go and seek professional advice on. And once again, with somebody that you trust. Okay, because if If you go to a broker, they're going to sell you 15,000 life insurance policies and all sorts of stuff like that. So have a look at where the advice is coming from. If this person is benefiting out of that advice, is it really best for you or is it best for them? Okay. I always say, people say to me, oh, this is the best deal. And I say to them, okay, is this the best deal for me or is this the best deal for you? Okay, because it can be the best deal for them and it's not what you need at all. So there are lots of things to put in place, but a lot of it's got to do with where you are and what type of business you're running and what the risks are. A lot of that is there. Then with generational wealth, I think that it is something that you have to be teaching your children, okay? And, you know, money is always this evil thing, but as Wynand said, the root of all evil is the love of money, not money, okay? Teach your children about money. Teach them how to work with money. Teach them how to budget. All of these things are important, all right? And then start trusting them, all right? So don't wait until you die for your children. Now suddenly they've got R1 million. What do I do with this R1 million? I don't know how to work with R1 million. Okay. Start slowly feeding in to your children, helping them, guiding them, advising them on an investment, stuff like that, so that as you get older, you can give them more and more and more and more. And me personally, my goal is one day when I die that I've got nothing, that I've given everything away, and then there's no death taxes. Yes, Wynand.
Can I maybe just say something on that as well? You know, I think one of the problems is when you start a business, it's small, and you do it in your name, which is the first mistake. So to protect yourself, you don't want to own stuff. So if you look at the estate stuff, you know, if you leave something to your spouse, there's no tax on it. So that's why, like a life policy and all that, you make your spouse the beneficiary, and then when that X million rand pays off, there's no tax for them to pay. But a business is a different ball game, or even a house. Take, for instance, you own a house, and in today's value, it's 3 million rand, just to put a number to it. Now, you can say in your estate, okay, it's going to my wife, and then when you die, it transfers to your wife, and she doesn't pay tax on it. There's transfer duty and all that. But now when she dies and the children own it or inherited it, they don't have the money to pay the tax on it. So now they have to sell it and half the money is gone. So it's important to think forward with this. So to protect your wealth in the future, put it in a company, and you can put a trust on top of the company to run the thing, because then it carries on generational and there's never taxes paid. It carries on for years and decades and centuries. The people that run the company, they just keep on changing. And then you protect it, because you might start with a small thing like selling whatever, but in 20 years, it might be worth an absolute fortune. And you want to be wise when you start, so that when that day comes, you don't lose everything, or your children lose everything. So there's simple things to put in place when you start. You might think it's expensive, and at the moment it is, because you don't make a lot of money, but now you have to set up a company, run it. It costs you a few thousand rand a year. But in 10 years, you look back and say, that was the cheapest thing I've ever done, because it's safe in there. Your children can run it with you. You know, if you do the structure correct with a company and even with a trust, you protect it, and the receiver is not going to get your money in a completely legal way. But once you keep stuff in your own name, you're in trouble, because when you die, someone's going to pay through their teeth. And many times there's not cash in the estate to pay the estate duty. If you work with bigger trust, I once worked with a guy. We had a business, we did retirement plannings and stuff. So got this one guy, he was an old gentleman. He was in his 70s by then. This was like 50 years ago. And he had shares in Rembrandt, you know, Rupert's shops. That he got in the 20s. You know, like he was a lighty and he got a couple of shares that was worth, when he got it, was worth 5,000 rand or something in 1940 or whenever it was. It was years ago. So he went to his accountant, and the accountant gave him this advice: no, just keep it in your name. So when I got to him, I'm talking about 1995, so it's long ago. In 1995, those shares were worth like 80 million rand. And he was like at the end of his life. So that accountant gave him the advice because it was his retirement package. Because the estate fee that the guy that does the estate do is like, say, 2.5%, 3%. On that money, in that day, he was going to collect 5 million rand just from that one transaction. And that's just because of stupidity. So be careful when you plan into the future. Speak to people like what he said now is wise. Don't speak to insurance people. They're going to make money out of you. There's nothing wrong with insurance, although, but just be wise. Speak to people that's not involved, that understand some logic about money, and get proper advice, because it might bite you badly in 30 years from now.
Cindy.
I think, morning everyone, something that just came to my mind now when we were talking about generational wealth. I mean, you were talking about integrity, running business with integrity. I just thought about how that can also protect your children. So, you know, Matla and I do know a family where the dad didn't have integrity, and then he passed on, and then they lost the business. And one day the son was telling me that he was walking around the mall and somebody came and threatened him and say, listen, you know, your dad did this to us. And because of that, you know, the contracts got bankrupt and they were kicked out and things like that. So I just thought about it, you know, just doing business with integrity that protects your children, your goodwill. Sometimes people will do business with your kids because your dad was a good man or your mom was a good woman.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So mine is also maybe a bit different, but it's, so if you are running a business and like you said, you are using what you have, and sometimes what you have is a job, because it finances a business. But then when is the right time to say, okay, I'm leaving my job, now it's time to get into the business? Talking to someone who's been running a business for 12 years.
Okay, my Lord, it's got to do with risk. Okay. Without risk, there's no reward. All right. So ultimately, you have to take the step, unless the plan is to always have it as something on the side. All right. So there are businesses that people do that are running on the side, and it always runs on the side. But the plan is to run it on the side. All right. If the plan is this is the thing we're going to do, then you've got to cut the strings at some stage, okay? And you've got to make that call, and it's going to be tough. And the rule normally is if you're starting a new business, is that you have sufficient money to run for 6 months, without an income. All right, so if you can do that, then you can do it. And you might have to sacrifice. So I can remember once, but it happened twice in my life, but I only remember the one time. For 6 months, our family ate vegetable soup. Okay, that's what we ate. Porridge in the morning, sandwich at lunchtime, vegetable soup for supper. Did that for 6 months because that was a sacrifice that we as a family made for my dad to be able to do what he needed to do in the business. All right, so it's not necessarily nice, but you need to look at it and say, okay, this is the sacrifice that we are going to make, and we're going to do it. Because you can take your standard of living where you are and say, okay, what do I need for 6 months of this? Or you can say, okay, for 6 months I'm going to drop my standard of living down to here. Then I need a far lesser amount to be able to go through that. So, call is yours.
Thank you, sir. I just want to check on that one. What is safe? Is it safe to start a business while working so that you see if it works? You don't take a risk of resigning and then you take all the money of pension and you start the business. While working, you want to see whether it's going to work before you resign. And the other thing, some of us, the companies that you are working for, you have to declare. And even if you register the business with your son or your child, you have to declare. And some of the companies that you are working with, if your child or gets there's a tender, and then for him or her to get the tender in that company, I have to declare that my son, especially me, I'm working for procurement. So I have to declare to say my son is, and he might be, he might not get that tender because I'm working for that company. So I just want to check, is it safe to resign and take the money to start the business, or start and see if it's working, and now I will keep on declaring, like, until when?
All right, that question is an interesting question. So the declaration you have to do, because that makes it legal and it makes it the integrity side. Okay, so that has to happen. Depending on what type of business it is. All right. So if somebody working for me had to come to me and say, I'm going to start a business doing steel work, I'll say to them, please hand in your notice now, give me your resignation, okay? That's what I would do, because this person has the opportunity, not saying they will, but they have the opportunity to take my customers, they have the opportunity to steal my material, and to steal my tools to do their job, okay? So that is why this thing of declaration comes in with companies. So if you are opening a KFC, you can declare it, and unless you're working for Nando's, they're not going to have a problem with it, okay? If you're working for Nando's, they'll probably dismiss you, okay, for conflict of interest. So that's on that side, so the integrity side there. When it comes to the business itself, all right, get back to what the question that Matlo had there. We need to have a look, and you need to say, okay, am I going to do this or am I not going to do it? And then how am I going to do it? So if you're going to do it and you're integral to make that thing work, it's very difficult to stay working somewhere else and do it. All right. If you're just an investor in with advice, then you can stay in your position and you can have a phone call in the evening, check how things are going, whatever. But if you are integral to make it work, you can't be sitting on the outside. All right. But you need to understand the risk. And as I said earlier with the Chinese guys, a lot of them only succeed on their third time. So they lose everything. They go back to work, get some money together again, try again, lose everything. Go back to work a bit, get some money together, try again, okay? So you need to go through everything carefully and have a look at your risks and say, okay, can we do this? Can't we do it? And even brilliant ideas sometimes don't come together. And it can be stuff outside of your control. If you have a look at this thing with the tariffs and Trump, okay, he put 100% tariffs on Lesotho. There's lots of factories in Lesotho. Most of those went bankrupt because suddenly they were exporting 90% of their products to the US. So they had no control over it, had nothing to do with them. Their business model was sound. Guy gets up one morning, he says 100% tariffs, boom, overnight business is gone. So that is the risk of having a business. Somebody somewhere else can make a decision that can affect you without them. They don't know you, they're not trying to be funny with you, but they make a decision and it affects you, all right? If we go back to Zuma opened our market to the Chinese. It closed down so many factories. He wasn't trying to close down factories in South Africa. We know what he was trying to do. He was trying to fill his own pocket. But he wasn't trying to close down factories. That wasn't his goal. But that was the result of what he did. So there is risk in business. Okay. So if you have to be part of the business to make it work, then you need to resign and go. But you have to understand the risk. All right. And as I say, if you can put 6 months worth of money together so that you can operate for 6 months without an income, then do it. Okay.
So I tend to get hyper-focused on something and I forget everything around me and I get very excited. So how do you balance work, personal life, church, by still meeting those goals, working hard, but not burning out and not neglecting your family and husband while you're doing it?
Okay, so somebody some years ago said to me, I keep my personal life and my church life and my business life separate. Okay, my answer to them is I only have one life. Okay, so everything is integrated, all right, and it's a priority thing. So if you have a look at it, you have to be shifting that priority all the time. Okay, so the one thing is that, okay, we're talking work now, not business. If you don't work, you don't get money. If you don't get money, your children don't eat. Okay, so you need to work, all right? And the Bible says, do everything as if unto the Lord, all right? So when you're at work, work with everything that you've got, okay? Do it as if unto the Lord. When you get home, you now got to clean the house, you got to cook, you got to do whatever. Do it as if unto the Lord, all right? And get that thing sorted out. What does that mean? It means when you're at work, okay, even though your husband is your priority, it is your priority to be working, okay? So you can't be sitting on your phone having nice chats with your husband the whole day at work and expect to get paid for it, because there's no integrity in that, and you're not honoring God by doing that, all right? So you have to look at that, and every single person is different with how you apply everything, because everybody's got different things. As I said, being an entrepreneur is 24/7. Does that mean that you don't have family time? No, it is important to have family time, okay? It is important to spend time with your spouse. It is important to do the things you need to do at church, all right? Because God's got a calling on your life, all right? And the calling is not only one aspect. He's called you to be a wife. He's called you to be a mother, okay? He's called you to work. He's called you to have fun. You know, God's called us to do all of those things. So we have to balance all of those things continuously. But for every person, that balance is different. but a lot of people do it God, spouse, children, work, like that, okay? And the theory of that is very good. But now you're at work, and your spouse phones and wants to chat about the dinner you're going to have tonight, okay? Then you say, but my spouse is higher up on the list than work. But it doesn't work like that, because at that time, work has to be up there. And so it's a balancing thing. It is not a simple thing of just saying, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the priorities. Okay, because things that you're doing with your work affect what you do with God. Okay? If you are messing about there, then you're actually dishonoring God. So your number one priority then is not being fulfilled because you're not doing your number 4 priority. Okay? So it is a difficult thing. Okay, it is a difficult thing. All right, anybody else? After we finish, Wynand and I will be available if anybody wants to chat to us anyway. So, yeah, if you think of more questions, I'm here. But the people who've got displays, you guys can go and get your stuff sorted out there. And then everybody else go and have a look, support them. And it's okay if we meet back at 11, then Wynand and you can take over.